I was born in Lebanon, in the city of Tripoli, which is located in North Lebanon. And I was born on April 16, 1973. I grew up in Lebanon, but we moved shortly after I was born. My family moved from the city of Tripoli to my father's village, mostly because of the war. It was safer in the village than in the city, and so we moved back to my father's village, which is, he's also from the north. It's a small village in northern Lebanon, and that's where I grew up till then, until 18. At the age of 18, I moved to Beirut to go to college. I went to the American University of Beirut, and then 2 years later, we came to the United States, to San Antonio. In 1993, I came to San Antonio. Where we lived, it was, compared to the rest of the country, it was safer. I mean, obviously, still the country was at war, and we did have we did witness few battles, but in a way we felt fortunate because compared to Beirut or the south of Lebanon and other areas in Lebanon, we didn't see a lot of battles and a lot of fighting. But still, living in a country that is at war, it's obviously difficult. I think it's difficult. I think it marks you, especially in my case. Basically my generation is considered. We used to be called the war generation because the war started right, around the same year that I was born, and people my generation were born. So we never knew our country except at war. And so I think it marked, at least in my experience, it marks you because from a very, very early age, I don't want to say I was politicized, but you start thinking about politics because everybody around you is talking politics. Everything is politics. You see, soldiers. You see militants. We had checkpoints, and for example, that was one of my early consciousness or something, that whenever we were driving somewhere, every few miles we'd have to stop at a checkpoint, and soldiers ask you, what's your name, where are you from, where are you going, it's small things like that. And whenever, because the Lebanese war lasted for a long time, and 15 years, and at times the actual fighting would kind of not be intense, and then all of a sudden there would be a lot of fighting. So when there would be like actual fighting and people dying, again, in my area we didn't see a lot of that, but we would see it on the TV. And I think in a way, it's kind of traumatic. And we knew people that, even though our area wasn't affected directly, but we had people from our area, especially young men, who would fight in some of these militias. We knew people who lost their, sons. So I think the effect is that the human dimension of it, the suffering, and the mothers who lose children and things like that, and then the politics of it. I think it makes you politically conscious. At least that's my experience. Because some people I know, like I have friends who've, in a way, it has the opposite effect. It makes them hate politics and not have to do anything, want to have to do anything with politics. So in a way, So I guess it has different effects on different people. I grew up in a more like politicized home and stuff like that, so maybe that also played a role in it, in my gaining political consciousness and stuff like that. And it affected everything. Like the school, all of a sudden, for example, school, sometimes out of nowhere we couldn't go to school, or there'd be strikes, and I know things like that happen in every society, strikes and that. But everything was precarious. You never knew what was gonna happen next. You never knew what was gonna, like sometimes all of a sudden there'd be a crisis of bread. Or wheat and bread and stuff like that, or crisis of gas, and like all of a sudden that the essential things for your living would not be available, and I think life has a precarious nature, and you kind of, I get, you don't realize that when you're little, but I think you don't think in those fancy terms, but I think you sense that, like, the contingency of life, and that it's not something reliable. And Both, because you definitely feel scared, and at the same time, because also that it lasted a long time, and because I grew up, like I was born into it, like I said, I never knew anything different. So in a sense, it becomes, as in a grotesque way, normalized. So that's your normal. You don't know anything else. And but at the same time, I remember, even as a child, even before I could understand the dynamics and the complexities of the politics, again, I guess, I suppose, on the human side of it, like I knew that people were the fact, and again, like the TV, I kind of connect that with TV and news and stuff like that, that you would see people dying, you would see people being pursued by other, like, militias or something. And I remember when I was little, there was a clip. I'm too little. I don't remember the context of it, but all I remember is they would play this clip on TV of somebody running up a building that's been shelled. So it's like a skeleton of a building, and somebody is running up, and like armed men are following them. And I remember how, like, I hated to see that clip, because I don't know if it was acting. I'm sure it was acting. I don't think it was like a real scene, but I think it bothered me a lot, and it made, I felt a lot of pain for that person. Especially in the 80s, the economic situation got worse. My father was a teacher, and all of a sudden there was inflation, and the prices of everything went up, and the value of the Lebanese currency went down a lot. So all of a sudden we went from, like, we were middle class or whatever, kind of money. We never were rich or anything, but money was not an issue. And all of a sudden, and it was for everybody, like all of a sudden things got too expensive. And I would remember my parents were, all of a sudden, maybe my father's salary wouldn't be enough to last the month and stuff like that. So I think that was definitely in our case, that was one of the motivations, or one of the reasons why we decided to leave, because the economic situation got worse. And like I said, my mother's family were here, and as we were growing, by the time we grew up, my sister and I, and we were going to go to college. Also, education was always very important. So my parents thought that even though obviously there are universities in Lebanon and everything, but eventually maybe we want to do graduate school here. So all of these like the presence of family members here, the war and the economic situation, even though by the time we left the war was over, because the war ended like in 1990, around that time. But the economic situation was still bad. So it was all these things, and we thought that, again, going to school here and all these things contributed to this decision to come here. I mean, it was both. It was obviously difficult because, all my friends, and college was, and living in Beirut in general was a lot of fun. So yes, it was difficult in that sense, but also I was excited about coming here because it's something new, and I didn't know what, like I was expecting something exciting, and so it was both. There was sadness for leaving my friends and the environment I was in, which I liked a lot, but also there was excitement to come here and experience something new. And also my sister she came before us, so that was also, we really wanted to come here so we can be together again, the whole family. We flew from, actually we flew from because at the same time that we came, my mother's brothers, my uncles who were still in Syria at the time, they came too. So we flew from Damascus airport we came to New York first. We spent the night in New York, and then we came to San Antonio. And I mean, when I came to San Antonio at the beginning, I was living obviously with my parents, and I ended up going to UTSA. But like back home, UT Austin is pretty well known, even for people back home. We know, like my friends, my best friend's father had graduated from UT Austin, and other people. So UT Austin is well known to people, at least in my area back home. So, but I didn't go there. Yes, we lived with my aunt, and my grandmother was, my grandmother who was living with my aunt also. So we lived all together for a few years before my grandmother passed away. Then we moved to a separate home. But yes, my aunt, primarily my aunt, and my uncles a little bit helped us definitely settle. Yeah, I mean, that was, again, I think my memory from that period, like you said, the packing and things like that, not just the physical, but is that it was both, like the sadness and excitement. So I remember my obviously I had a lot of friends, but there were two that were, my best friends, that basically my friends from childhood. Of course, they were with me all the time, and they were helping us pack and things like that. And as usual, we would be joking and laughing. But there was also, of course, there was an element of sadness. But at the time, of course, I mean, I don't know what we thought. We thought that we'd be still seeing each other often. They would come visit me, and I would go visit and things like that. We didn't think probably that, we would. What happened is now each one of us lives somewhere. And at the time, you don't think that's what's going to happen. You think you're going to be with your friends forever. Of course, I remember when my grandmother on my father's side was from Lebanon. I remember after we finished packing, it was a little bit late. I went. She lived on the first floor, and we lived up. And I went down to say goodbye to her, and I remember I cried and stuff like that. But I never. It's okay, I'm sorry, I'm just emotional.
It's okay.
So I cried, and I never saw her again. Okay,
It's okay.
I'm
Now,
just
I'll give you a
weird.
minute.
So yeah, I mean, my friends, of course, like everybody, all the people, even people that like maybe I wasn't very close to at the time, still everybody came and said goodbye, and but at the same time I was excited about coming and being with my uncles and aunt and my sister. So it was both. My mother decided pretty much. It was up to her, Yes, we brought, I mean, it's hard because I brought some personal things, but of course you leave a lot of things behind. And our house back in our village has been shut, since we left, so a lot of stuff are still there. I think that part of it has been more difficult for my mother, because it's her house. She bought everything. So she always brings that up, the stuff that we left behind, and she thinks she still wants to go and like ship them or something. Yeah. We brought all our pictures. Some at the time we would listen to music on cassettes, tape. So I think I brought that. I brought some books. I couldn't bring all my books, which I would, if I could, I probably would want to bring everything. Obviously we brought clothes, and some house items, the things that are not light, that were important to my mother, she brought them. Like she had
pots or...
No, she had the set, for example, of forks and knives that were like real silver, so they're supposed to be kind of valuable. So she brought that, things like that. More ornamental things. Like I said, my sister and I were still both of us going to school. We worked part-time with the family restaurants. My parents, my father back home was a teacher. He taught history, and my mom stayed at home as a. But when they came here, they wanted to like open some kind of business. My mom knew how to sew, so they opened an alteration shop. But my mother doesn't speak English, so and my father is he's not very fluent in English, but he can get by. So he would stay with her, so he could translate, when customers came in. So they had that alteration business for a while. I don't remember now, but exactly, but for many years. And it was they were kind of happy because they got to meet. I'm sorry, I don't know. Yeah, they were happy when they had the alteration shop because they were in contact with people all the time. Their customers loved them. And they became friends with people and things like that. Then eventually, as they got older, especially my mom got tired. Her hands started hurting and stuff like that. So they eventually closed. They sold the business, and they've been more like isolated since then, because they stay home most of the time. And like I said, my mother doesn't speak English, so. And how like back home social life is different. People are, especially that we spend our life in a village, so your door is always open. Your people come in without they don't call you in advance to see if it's okay. People just come in. You're always around people, or you go visit people all the time. So social life is very vibrant back home, and that's especially for them, it's a big change, and especially for my mother, because she loves to be around people. So that's, I would say, one of the most difficult things that has been for all of us, but I think it's the toughest on my mother. We think it's the weirdest thing that, some of we greet our neighbors and our neighbors greet them, but they don't visit us, we don't visit them. We have one neighbor that he comes in and visits us every once in a while. He has grapevines, and he knows that we use the leaves to make. So when the season for them in the spring, he picks them up and brings them, or tells my mom that she can go pick them if she wants. And so he visits us a little bit, but not much. And back home, now when the weather is nice, everybody would be sitting outside. People don't stay inside. They would be sitting outside drinking coffee, and people would come, visit with each other. And we think it's weird that here people don't sit outside, that they don't the neighbors don't visit each other and things like that. But obviously, we're used to it now after all these years. At the beginning, it was the people. It was not seeing the people I was used to seeing all my life. Especially at the beginning, that was hard. You mean culturally, socially, or politically, or?
Any of those things.
Politically, to be honest, especially after 9/11, it became kind of tough because of the politics, and I think. Thankfully, we did not, in San Antonio, I don't know if you know that, but some businesses owned by Arab people were vandalized, broken into. There were a few incidents, I don't know if you've heard about them, soon after 9/11. Thankfully, we personally were not exposed to any of this personally, but just knowing that other people, other Arabs did, and just the politics in general. I remember at the time, my sister and I, we had our own pizza restaurant, and while at work we would listen to we listened to NPR all the time while we would work. And I remember just listening to the news was almost depressing, almost without over dramatizing, traumatic, because it was just the sense of incessant anti-Arab sentiment expressed in the politics and everything, the way politics was being covered, and it at least, and again, I speak for myself, it makes, it's hard. It's in that sense also, I would say that since that time, life was a little, and that's not about getting used to, but it's different from it's not a matter of getting used to or not, but just the things that I feel that have been difficult to deal with. Yes. I think some of the best part is again the fact that we were as a family reunited again, because like I said, my sister had moved here before us and we were separated from her for a few years. My college experiences, both in undergraduate and graduate school, were both very kind of fulfilling. The academic part of it, because I was complaining about the social life at UTSA. Meeting new people, I definitely, it enriched my being here in the United States in general, and I think especially in San Antonio, enriched my experiences in life. Like, I think I've been exposed to things that, for example, my friends who stayed in Lebanon didn't. The people I've met, I'm a little bit, I'm not too much of a little bit of an activist, I suppose you can say, so I'm not as active as I should be, but so the people I've met within that community, progressive activists, people, it's all these things. I think we are lucky here in San Antonio is that we have the typical American culture, and we have a lot of Mexican influence, and I feel that this was, of course, when I was in Lebanon, I did not know the extent to which that was the case, so that was kind of a surprise and a pleasant surprise to feel like I feel somewhat of a connection to Mexican culture too, in addition to American culture. So, it's been in many ways, it's been a very enriching experience to be in San Antonio.